The 150cc motorcycle has been always the lion's chunk of the premium motorcycle market in India. However, while the sales are good, the growth rates are good, the actual movement of the product, the evolution of the motorcycle themselves has slowed down over the past few months. I'm happy to say that cycle has now been broken, and today I have with me 4 new 150s that have come onto the market. Today we're going to ride them and find out what they bring to the market and which are the ones you should be spending your money on.
Let's start with Bajaj's new Discover 150F, a motorcycle that promises 150cc thrills at a 125cc price.
Discover 150F is supposed to be the premium end of Bajaj's Commuter line, and that makes this 150 in positioning one notch below the other 150s here. But is it one notch below as a motorcycle? Well, I'm not convinced, because it does have a nice amount of power. It's got a nice mid-range. By design, it does not have too much of a top end, so if you're trying to do highway work, it's a little bit noisy and harsh. But overall, it's a quite sweet motorcycle in traffic because it gets to traffic quite nicely. You can feel that the weight is light, and the only things I would change is I think this whole fairing looks a little plasticky to me. The finish levels on the fairing could stand to improve quite a bit, and I think the disc brake needs a little more feel because it feels very spongy and almost like a drum brake in feel. But overall, I think the biggest issue with the Discover for me is that the difference between the 100M, the 125M, the 150S and the 150F is just not enough.
The effectiveness of the Discover isn't in question. It makes a good, fast, frugal commuter without any doubt. But it just doesn't feel as premium as the other bikes here, and perhaps that explains why the Discover is the cheapest of all the bikes here as well. And the first of the premium 150s in the true sense of the word then is the recently updated Hero Xtreme.
The Hero 150s, the Achiever, the Hunk, have always been nice motorcycles, but have they been the best in the segment? Perhaps not. On the other hand, this Xtreme was always famous for not being very pretty, and they've gone and facelifted it, and some of it works. If you look at this motorcycle from here backwards, it's quite nice, but if you look at this face, the daylight running lamps, they don't really sit well with the motorcycle. But in terms of styling, there's even more interesting detail. Come here, I'll show you. So, when I saw the motorcycle for the first time, my first thought was the movie Scream, and my second thought was the movie Transformers, because every time I look at this around, it's a little overdone for me. What it reminds me of is Megatron with the Scream jaw, with the long jaw like the Scream. But we can poke a little bit of fun at the styling of the Hero. The fact of the matter is, it is a nice 150cc motorcycle. You will enjoy riding it, and the question is it the best motorcycle here or not?
It could be. Like the other Hero 150s, the Xtreme is easy to like. It's clearly good at city riding. It's responsive enough both in terms of the engine as well as the chassis. It's also good on bad roads. Ride quality isn't soft enough to be called plush, but certainly is soft enough to be easy to live with. Performance and economy similarly are in the ballpark, and in that way the Xtreme is not hard to live with. Styling aside, completely inoffensive. But the styling is the real question here, because the Xtreme looks neat, fairing aside, and tells you what the 150cc motorcycle in India would look like had they continued to evolve from where the Hero Honda CBZ started the segment. However, unfortunately for the Xtreme, the Yamaha FZ line of motorcycles really upped the styling game with their plastic tank covers and all of that sculpting.
It is difficult to mess with success, and the Yamaha FZ is a pretty successful model for the company. So what they've done is small improvements across the motorcycle that lift the whole motorcycle up. But does it lift this motorcycle to version 2? I think version 1.3 is where I'd put it, because if you think about it, significantly nothing has changed. It's the same motorcycle. The styling has to be the same because the identifiability of the FZ is very important. The engine is improved, and the slew of improvements that they've done, the small things together, is what they call blue coat together. So overall, it is a better motorcycle. But is it dramatically improved? Is it version 2?
There is a lot of FZ-ness to the version 2 to be sure, but the motorcycle has changed in feel and nature. It's a quieter, smoother motorcycle, and it feels like the ride quality has improved and become really good at absorbing some pretty serious punishment. The sense of familiarity, if you've ridden the FZ version 1, is pretty strong, and I think Yamaha have done a good job of the upgrade if you think "do not disturb the apple cart" was the core dictum. The trouble is that maybe Yamaha needed to push this motorcycle further forward, and the styling is a good example of this. The FZ has been freshened up to ensure it looks fresh, and there's numerous touches to ensure the version 2 motorcycle looks sharper. But ride out about town and you will notice that it is extremely hard to spot the new one from the old one, and I think that's a miss, especially given the fact that you can still buy the old one. On the other hand, Suzuki, the newest player in this market, shows that you can be like the FZ without being the FZ. There's a lot of lines in the tank and panels of the new Gixxer that clearly remind you of the Yamaha motorcycle.
As motorcycle manufacturers go, I have a love-hate relationship with Suzuki because I see some of the Suzukis they're selling abroad and they're incredible, and then I see the Suzukis that we get and they're not. But I think with that motorcycle it changes a little bit because for the first time Suzuki have in the Gixxer a motorcycle for the enthusiast, and I like that. They could easily have taken the GS 150R as a base and just redone it, and they haven't. It's an all-new motorcycle, it's a sporty motorcycle, they call it their flagship. And it is even in this 4, it's the only completely all-new motorcycle we have on test. And I think that's a good start.
But all the apprehension and history is just swept aside when you ride the Gixxer, because Suzuki's effort in not evolving the GS 150R into the Gixxer was a good call. The new bike is gutsy, it has a lovely, distinct intake roar, and is actually quite a lot of fun to ride above and beyond the call of commuter duty. In the corners, the Gixxer feels a little long, which is good for stability and thrust. But after a while, you realize it corners rather well, bumps are absorbed well enough, and the engine seems to have torque on demand at all revs as well. Very impressive indeed. But does it look too much like the Yamaha then? Well, between the restrained graphics and the color palette, I was surprised at how many people on the road instantly realize that you're riding something they cannot readily identify. And yet, the shape tells them it's probably a 150. I guess one way to look at it is that the Gixxer could have been more original in design. But I think for a relatively conservative group of customers, this is pretty on the ball. Especially given the fact that while Yamaha raised prices by adding a fuel-injected FZ version 2 to the top of its line, the Suzuki Gixxer is priced to compete with the older FZ.
We've ridden the motorcycles, and now comes the twist in the tail, the pricing. The Discover 150F is priced at 60,000 rupees ex-showroom. It's a good price, it's a good motorcycle for the price, but the next motorcycle above that in pricing is the Xtreme, which with the rear disc brake is 9,000 more. And then if you add another 8,000 to that, so that's 17 over the Discover, you get this, the Suzuki Gixxer. And if you add another 5,000 to the price of the Gixxer, now we're talking 22,000 rupees more than the Discover 150F, you get the Yamaha FZ. Now that begs the question, what's going on here and what should you be spending your money on? Well, the simple answer is, best value for money overall is clearly the Discover 150F. It's got the performance, it quite maybe doesn't have that kind of refinement, it's probably not that involving or premium feeling, but it's not supposed to. It is the most affordable motorcycle here and it knows what its job is. Best motorcycle here? No. Best value for money? Definitely yes. The other 3 motorcycles are one notch above. In that set, I think the Xtreme is the one that can do with the most improvement. It is a nice motorcycle, you'll be happy living with it, and for the price, I think it makes a lot of sense. But if you want the best motorcycle here, you have to look at these 2 motorcycles. And that first brings me to Yamaha, the most expensive motorcycle on test here. And I have to say, Yamaha did a lot of work to improve the old FZ to create this one, and you can see the improvements. The ride quality is much better. It's a much more comfortable motorcycle. Refinement levels are higher. Equipment levels are slightly better. You can actually read the screen easily. But is it worth 5,000 rupees more than that? Think it's not, because what everybody's calling this motorcycle in overdrive is the Yamaha FZ version 3. This is the motorcycle that one needed to be, because it does everything this one does. It reminds you very strongly of the FZ, but it does everything better. There's more power, there's more refinement. It's a slightly longer feeling motorcycle, so stability is better. And the killer point, it's 5,000 rupees cheaper. So the best motorcycle here, the Suzuki Gixxer. That's the motorcycle the Pulsar now has to beat.